As you prepare your breakfast, think of others. Do not forget to feed the pigeons. As you wage your wars, think of others. Do not forget those who fight for peace. As you pay your water bill, think of others, those who are nursed by clouds. As you return home to your home, think of others. Do not forget the people of the camps. As you sleep and count the stars, think of others, those who have nowhere to sleep. As you liberate yourself with metaphors, think of others, those who have lost their right to speak. As you think of others far away, think of yourself and say, if only I were a candle in the night.
This is for Palestine and Quds, the capital Jerusalem. Unarmed people marching to the wall and they're shooting them. Suppression is a question, resistance is the answer. Long live Palestine, long live Gaza.
So, we just want to welcome you to our event, At the Root of It All, Legacies of Colonization from Mount Vernon to Palestine. This event is hosted by Westchester for Palestine and Black Alliance for Peace. Just a little bit about the Black Alliance for Peace. The Black Alliance for Peace seeks to recapture and redevelop the historic anti-war, anti-imperialist, and pro-peace positions of the radical black movement. Through educational activities, organizing, movement support, organizations and individuals in the Alliance will work to oppose both militarized domestic state repression and the policies of destabilization, subversion, and the permanent war agenda of the US state globally. And so we're just glad to be able to work with Westchester for Palestine to put on this really great collaboration. And we're so excited to see all of you guys here and all of the people online, because this event's gonna be great. So just a few things that we want people to know. So first of all, we wanna thank everyone for coming out, and thank you for coming out during Ramadan. We will have some snacks to take for you on the go after the end of the event, just to be respectful of everyone practicing this during this month. And also happy Easter to everybody who's Christian in the room. So as you guys may have read, the purpose of this event is to discuss the issue of colonization through the lens of the struggles of Black African people, Palestinian people, and also Indigenous people to Turtle Island here, right? To discuss the stories of all three of these groups and how the issues that they share in common, and just to show that these issues are really all connected to each other, right? And just to explain how we are, forgive the cliche, stronger together. So, so our first speaker coming up is Sister Asantua Nkrumah Toure, pronouns she, her, and co-conspirator. She is a longtime community organizer, radical feminist, socialist, Pan-Africanist, and church sister. She is an active dues-paying member of the Black Alliance for Peace and has been an active member in at least one organization all of her adult life. Her political affiliations include the Green Party of Philadelphia and the Philly Tenants Union. Her organizing, research, and public speaking and unapologetic solidarity with our beloved Palestinians goes back more than 40 years. Most recently, she has represented BAP at the Palestine Solidarity Actions in Philadelphia, the National March on Palestine for Palestine in November in Washington, D.C., and the National Students for Justice in Palestine Conference in February 2023 on the campus of UCLA in Los Angeles, California. Now, she probably wouldn't want me to say this, but if you guys saw the march in November, then you might have, she's laughing already. You might have seen, you might have seen her video, and if you haven't, I will share it later because it's amazing, of her speaking. It was great. And it kind of went a little bit viral, and it's one of my favorite videos of her speaking, but you might have seen it, so. Yes. So we'll get her set up in just a second, and you'll be able to hear her speak, okay?
Okay. Greetings, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and thanks the organizers for this invitation. My name is Asantwa Nkrumah Toure, pronouns she, her, co-conspirator. And I'm very happy to be here this afternoon because I'm among strong comrades and strong co-conspirators. We no longer call ourselves allies because we have a common destiny, we have a common struggle, and we have this common enemy called Zionism. Zionism is the enemy of humanity, and no matter how it expresses itself politically or theologically. So for Black Alliance for Peace, this is a very important topic for Land Day. As Malcolm X taught us, land is the basis of all freedom, justice, and equality. So for Black Alliance for Peace, I would just add that when it comes to our beloved Palestine, the solidarity between African and Palestinian people goes back decades to the years before the modern civil rights movement to the present, and many BAP members have also visited Palestine. Our solidarity with the Palestinian people and all their resistance forces is firm and unapologetic. So next page, next slide, I'm sorry. Okay, so for those who are not familiar with Land Day, every year on March 30th, the Palestinian people commemorate the 1976 Land Day, during which Palestinians and Zionist Israel went on a general strike and organized mass demonstrations to protest Israel's theft of their land. Israel's police killed 6 people and seriously wounded many more. The protests were not only against the brutal land theft, but also against the settler colonial policies of erasure. Next slide. So just some key terms. I think for many of you in the audience, you may be familiar with these, but there are, of course, many terms that we use in our movement, but just to narrow them down a bit, Zionism, a political ideology that seeks to confuse religion, nationality, race, etc., to justify theft of land, erasure of culture and history, wars of conquest, etc. Zionism uses Judaism to justify its crimes against the Palestinians, though Zionism and Judaism are not the same. Also, along with that, we as anti-imperialists, we as leftists may also make clear that who are and are not Semitic people. Zionism is anti-Semitic because it's anti the people who are indigenous to Palestine and that part of the world. Colonialism, when a country, for example, France, pushes its power and control onto another country for economic and political gain, i.e. unfair influence on government decisions, exploitation of natural resources, cultural erasure, etc. For example, Algeria in Northern Africa and Haiti in the Caribbean are both colonies of former colonies of France. Settler colonialism, and this brings us really to what we're discussing today. Settler colonialism, when a group of people settle into another country, take over, displacing, injuring, or killing the original indigenous inhabitants. Examples of this include the Europeans that settled into Palestine, the Western Hemisphere, Australia, New Zealand, the British into Northern Ireland, etc. Next slide. All right. Okay, so this piece is one of my favorites of Malcolm X. This is his piece, Zionist Logic. I won't read all of that, but you can find it anywhere online. It's dated September 17th, 1964, was written, published in the Egyptian Gazette while Malcolm X was in Egypt at the invitation of Gamal Nasser. That's very important because at that time, a lot of activists, a lot of organizers were visiting Egypt and other parts of the African continent, meeting all these different leaders, really engaged in anti-colonial struggle. So when you get a chance, please take a glance at Zionist Logic, and what he said in 1964 is very relevant to us today. Next slide. All right, so for myself, I was once a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Thus, I organized and was mentored by so many people who were members of the AAPRP, but were also former members of SNCC, the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Movement, etc. So here we have my big brother, Kwame Ture, known by his former colonial name of Stokely Carmichael, meeting with Yasser Arafat. This picture is from the 1970s, I think mid to late 1970s. The middle picture, again, Kwame Ture, our sister Ethel Minor, and then Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of independent Ghana. Ethel Minor is very dear to all of us in our movement, in our Palestine Solidarity movement, because she helped to first politically educate SNCC. She traveled several countries in South America, met students from Palestine, from Lebanon, other parts of the Middle East, came back to the US and wrote an article, a series of articles, one of which is there, Third World Roundup, The Palestine Problem, Know the Facts. So imagine you're a young woman in SNCC and you're in our movement and you meet these people and you're so inspired and impressed, you want to share that with other people, you want to share that with others in your organization. And as many of you know, is at that point that SNCC became quote unquote controversial. They took a strong position in solidarity with Palestine and against Zionism. And around that time, a lot of people, some of them who were more liberal in their politics, they left SNCC or they refused to donate money. It caused a lot of controversy, but I'm so thankful that all of the people who were in SNCC at that time and other organizations since stayed firm, maintained that anti-Zionist position. And now we see the benefits today, looking at all the Palestine actions going on. Next one. Okay, the picture on your left is from the first Pan-African Cultural Fest in Algeria in 1969. So people in this picture here, you have Eldridge Cleaver on the far left wearing glasses, other members of the Black Panther Party, members of the PLO, and the gentleman sitting kind of facing with a shirt jacket, that's former Algerian President Ben Bella. That picture is classic. The picture on the right that says Vietnam to Palestine, the struggle, one struggle, many fronts. What's significant about this is at this time, 1972, more and more people were making the connections about different struggles. Also, this picture says something to me anyway, from people that I've met. A lot of our Jewish comrades who were in the anti-war movement, going through all of that, they had to also struggle in their Jewish community about the issue of Zionism. What we see now, more and more of our Jewish comrades taking a more explicit, a more public anti-Zionist position. One young man has been quoted saying that he never realized how brainwashed he had been until what happened in October. So next slide. Okay, other examples of solidarity and really trying to know the world. This is a picture of members of Black Lives Matter, Dream Defenders, and some hip hop artists, because I know some people in this picture. They were in Palestine in 2014. All right, next slide. Okay, need we say more about our dear Baba, Nelson Mandela? This is one of those favorite quotes of his, and he stayed firm on that. And we could also look on with pride at how South Africa took Zionist Israel to the International Criminal Court. Now, it may not have accomplished all that we wanted, but it was such a significant step because other countries are now engaging in similar types of work. So we salute South Africa for taking that wonderful, public, courageous position. The next slide. Okay, yes, thank you. So you may know the woman on our left, Rasmia Ode, and our great sister, Angela Davis. There was a lot of organizing around Rasmia Ode. I think back in the early to mid 2000, people were trying to prevent her from being deported because we we thought it was being politically motivated because she was Palestinian, because she was anti-Zionist, and she did a lot of work and networking and all those kind of things. So this example of our solidarity among African and Palestinian people, it goes back many, many years. I can give you another example. A lot of people have whatever kind of feelings about the Nation of Islam, but I can tell you some of that is out of ignorance, and some of that is because they may know some of the history of how the Honorable Elijah Muhammad back in the late 1940s, early 1950s, wrote a very small paragraph, basically saying in the then newsletter of the Nation of Islam, basically he said, those folks should not take the land from those Arabs. That was a kind of a simple type of anti-Zionist position. But then, you know, many years later, with Malcolm X, he wrote one of the first articles in the Old Muhammad Speaks about Palestine after he visited Palestine. So it's this continuity of struggle, this continuity of really connecting all of our struggles that is really fascinating and inspiring. Next one. Okay, Zionism is big business. Now, when it comes to this, you can research this for a couple of weeks or a couple of months and still find out a lot of great additional information. But I'll just read two of these. There are several Israeli tech companies that do business with police departments, prisons, universities, etc. For example, what I have here is that the LA Police Department uses Israeli surveillance software that can track your phone and social media. The software is built by Cobwebs Technologies and uses an artificial intelligence to track, surveil, and profile and create profiles of people based on online and phone data. This firm was founded in 2015 by two former IOF special operatives and a former Mossad official. Imagine that. So this company is part of a controversial, really sinister $1 million surveillance industry. And they test these things on Palestinians before it's sold and used in other parts of the world. This right there, Deadly Exchange, read more about that when you get a chance. Basically how police departments here in the US are trained in Zionist Israel, and they go there to learn worst practices in terms of to promote brutal policing in both countries. So this includes police departments in New York, Philadelphia, DC, etc. To give another recent example, in 2011, the police department of Louisville, Kentucky participated in this exchange under the then leadership of Police Chief Robert White. This is the same police department that killed Breonna Taylor in 2020. Now, here about Caterpillar. Caterpillar I find fascinating because we know Caterpillar engages in these demolitions in Palestine. We know it was a Caterpillar bulldozer that killed Rachel Corrie in 2003. And here in Philadelphia, we had a very sad thing that happened last week. A long-time apartment complex that was a HUD housing complex was demolished. And in the picture on the news, it shows what? A Caterpillar bulldozer. So these connections and how Zionism is big business, there are people becoming millionaires and billionaires off of their contracts, etc. And this also shows us why BDS is so important, because BDS also includes artists, concert management companies, etc. Some of you may know one of my favorite artists, Bruno Mars, was in Zionist Israel to perform before everything jumped off. And rather than canceling the 2-day concert, he went ahead with his, I'm sorry, he performed one night, but didn't perform the next night. I'm sorry. So keep that in mind. Also, as I shared with Imani earlier today, the new Bob Marley movie, I was told by a friend, because I haven't watched it, but I was told by a friend that there's no mentioning of Peter Tosh. And perhaps that could be because Peter Tosh back in the day was very political. In the song Equal Rights and Justice, read the lyrics. And he goes down a list of countries that want equal rights, and he mentions Palestine. There's a picture of Peter Tosh from the 1970s, and he's wearing a keffiyeh. So that could be the reason why he's not in the movie, you know. Ziggy Marley is executive producer of the movie, and he's also married to a Zionist. So this is what we got to work with. And all of these kind of people will be exposed as we continue our movement. All right, now I'm just going to go through some of these in the interest of time, but I want you to really take a look when you get a chance. You know, the world truly stands with Palestine. Just about every country on this planet has had some type of pro-Palestine something. A vigil, a prayer-in, a die-in, a rally, a protest, occupying buildings, all kind of things, right? So let's just go through these real quickly. South Africa, Kenya. Next slide. Just real quickly, Greece, Portugal, but check out the one in the middle, Belfast, Northern Ireland. Ireland has one of the strongest Palestine solidarity movements in all of Europe. Here in Philadelphia just last week, we had a Ireland-Palestine solidarity action at the Irish Famine Memorial. It was very powerful because we don't talk about enough, but now we will, the solidarity, the longtime solidarity between Ireland and Palestine, because as Ireland has taught us, they were occupied by the British before the British occupied Africa, India, and other countries, 800 years. So this was very good to see. And then later after this event, we went to see a Northern Ireland hip hop group called Kneecap. Definitely check them out. At the concert venue, they brought up the Palestinian flag, and everybody went crazy, waving their Irish flags or their Irish colored keffiyehs. It was really, really great. So this is skip through. Next slide. There's Hawaii, Tokyo, Japan, Seoul, South Korea. When you get a chance, check out the video of the pro-Palestine rally in Tokyo, Japan. It is incredible. Next slide. Slide on the picture on the far left. That is our sister Fusako Shijanubu. She spent 20 years in prison for some of her political activity in support of Palestine as a co-founder of the Japanese Red Army. Let's go to the next slide in the interest of time. Cuba, Cuba, Cuba C, Cuba C. Cuba has always been one of the strongest voices internationally in solidarity with Palestine. These young people here are Palestinian students attending the Latin American School of Medicine. Some of you may know of that program. Students are there from all over the world, but including Palestine, including Africa, even included from some indigenous nations here in North America. They go there to study medicine, get a quality education, and they go back to their respective communities to serve the people. Next slide there, from Palestine to Standing Rock. Another great videos and pictures I've seen are the different indigenous tribes attending all these events in solidarity with Palestine, really breaking down the history of settler colonialism and the many ways it manifests itself. It's just really been great to see the world really come out in solidarity with Palestine, and we look forward to more of that. So I'm just gonna try to go through this really quick. Next slide, just some resources you can read at another time when you get a chance. I think I should close now. If Imani or anyone else wants to share those lists of resources with you sometime later, please do. A lot of great books, great articles. Some of you may have heard of Susan Abu Hawa. She's a Palestinian writer, wrote a book called Mornings in Jenin. Our dear brother, Rafat Al-Arir, wrote Gaza Writes Back. He was killed recently with all the Zionist bombings of Gaza. Zionism in Haiti, Israel exporting an apartheid state, by one of our Black Alliance for Peace members, Josh Reeves. Do check that out. So a lot of great resources. Let's continue to have events like this. Let's continue to research. Let's attend to plan these actions and organizational activities. Let's travel to Palestine if we can. I just want to say thank you all so very, very much for this opportunity. I'm really excited to be on this panel with John Kane and Dr. Abdulhadi. Trying to pronounce her name correctly, but I'm very excited to be on this panel with them. Thank you all so very, very much. Free Palestine, free Palestine. Thank you.
So up next, we have John Kane. John Kane is a Mohawk man from
Cattaraugus.
Thank you. And of the Seneca Nation, and has a direct connection to the people and territories of the Six Nations. He hosts the weekly show Resistance Radio on WBAI and other Pacifica Nations stations. He also hosts Let's Talk Native, the only Native talk show in Western New York.
Well, I want to thank you guys for coming out. I might be a bit loud because I'm a bit loud. My name is John Kane. My Ungwe name is Garhio. I am Mohawk, or more accurately, Gunyagahaga. My wife is Oneida, or more accurately, did I set off an alarm? No. Or more accurately, Onyotaaga. We live in Seneca territory, also more accurately, Onondawaga. We have 3 children, 10 grandchildren, and this is part of what I do. Not just radio and not just podcasts, but I'm actively engaged in trying to correct the effects of colonization. And let me just be clear. I mean, I don't know that I'm going to make everybody comfortable with some of the stuff that I say. We say colonization, we say imperialism, we say Zionism, we say these things, but we mean theft. We just mean theft, the taking of lives, of land, of resources, wealth. That's what it is. And we can put all kinds of isms after it. We can dress it up with 4 syllable words all we want. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. Now, as a Native person, and look, there's a lot of different terminologies. I'm not an Indian, I'm not a Native American, I'm not an American Indian. I even cringe a little bit with the word indigenous, because indigenous is framed as if we are mere descendants of a people, not the actual people. I am Gunyagahaga. I am Ongwe. That's our word for Native. I use the word Native because it's benign. But I do this work because we are ignored and we're forgotten. And even when we're mentioned oftentimes, it's almost like it's a reference to the past. It's almost like we're going to look at what happened to those people. And even when we see things like Standing Rock, even when we see some of these things that put us in the news for a little while, most people just can't fathom the idea that we are still going through this on a daily basis. And it's not right-wing and left-wing. It's not Republicans and only and not Democrats. Kathy Hochul, the governor of this state, she squeezed $500 million out of the Seneca Nation, $2.2 billion in total from New York State, out of the Seneca Nation alone. Money that they need for their own people. New York State, you know what $2.2 billion is to New York State? It's barely anything. But it's a lot to our people. So it's not just about the Republicans, it's the Democrats too. And I'm not saying this I know people are trying to sign up Democrats, and I get that. But you know what? My fight is with the entire system. Green Party too. Because it's all about colonialism. It's all about this idea to promote this concept of American exceptionalism. And anybody who thinks that the current status is something gone wrong, no, it isn't. It's the way it's designed. Right. This is the system. And you know what? You're probably going to have Donald Trump as your next president. That's right. Because that's the system and that's the way it's designed. It's designed to favor people like him. White supremacy. The country's built on white supremacy. It's built on the doctrine of Christian discovery. Christian discovery. The doctrine of Christian discovery. And that's what promoted slavery. as what promoted genocide, and it still is in play today. Even though the Vatican last year somewhat repudiated their position with the doctrine of Christian discovery, they claimed, oh, no, we didn't do that. It was misinterpreted. It was just papal bulls that were misinterpreted. Bullshit. I mean, bullshit. And the reality is, it's been codified in law for over 200 years in the United States. And you know what? It's not like it was a law that was passed. And this is this is what I really need to emphasize. A country that claims to be operating under its constitution or under rule of law, that's bullshit too. Because there are certain legal principles that are not passed as laws. They just get embedded into US law because a Supreme Court justice says it. Justice John Marshall, 1823, takes the doctrine of Christian discovery and he makes it part of US law. And he says that we are like the animals, meaning indigenous people. That we merely just exist. That we can't hold title to land. Even though 10 years before that, or I'm sorry, 30 years before that, the United States entered into treaties with my people, the Six Nations. And they said, we acknowledge that the land is yours and we will never claim the same, nor will we disturb you in the free use and enjoyment of your lands. 1794. But in 1823, Justice John Marshall says, no, Native people can't hold title to land. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, your liberal darling of the Supreme Court, God rest her soul. That's sarcasm, sorry. She cited the doctrine of Christian discovery in 2005. So the Jewish lady on the Supreme Court cites the doctrine of Christian discovery in 2005. Not 200 years ago. 2005. And she cited it specifically, again, my wife's Oneida. This was the city of Sherrill versus Oneida, 2005. The Oneidas were reacquiring lands that were previously defrauded from them. And she cites that. And she actually does a definition of the doctrine of Christian discovery. She says, the title of the land became vested, or that were occupied by Native people, became vested in the sovereigns. First, the discovering nations of Europe, then the states, and then the United States. She didn't say how that happened. Well, I'll tell you how it happened. Justice John Marshall said, the mere casting of eyes upon us by the Christian nations of Europe meant that we were conquered. He says that it was an arrogant pretension. Yeah, I'll say it was an arrogant pretension. So they basically equated discovery, their notion of discovery, with conquest. I'm going to tell you, in the history of the United States, there was probably only 50 tops armed conflicts with Native people. 50 tops. And you know what? The United States didn't win them all. So how was that conquest? And yet this is where we are. 100 years after they codified that into law, they passed a law called the Indian Citizenship Act, where the Senate and Congress voted almost unanimously, and they declared that Native people were U.S. citizens. 1924, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the Indian Citizenship Act. Now, we were never citizens of the United States. In fact, we're outside of the U.S. Constitution. So how do you deal with the people that live on the land that you want? And your Constitution clearly says, and we're mentioned 3 times, just so you know, 3 times we're mentioned in the U.S. Constitution. Once in the apportionment clause of the Constitution, it said, and it calls us Indians not taxed. And basically what they say is don't count us. Don't count us for apportionment of taxation or of representation in Congress. We are not yours. They are not a part of us, is basically what it says in the apportionment clause. Then we're mentioned in the treaty clause where it says the president has the power to negotiate treaties with foreign nations and with Indian tribes. Again, we're outside, we're different, we're outside of the U.S. Constitution. Then in the commerce clause it says Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce in and among several states with foreign nations and with Indian tribes. Not of Indian tribes, with Indian tribes. Not crazy about the language. Tribes is another word I'm not crazy about either, but I won't belabor that point. So we're not a part. We were never a part of it. When they passed the 14th Amendment, trying to make former slaves citizens of the United States, we weren't included in that either. And the language is clear. It says, all persons born under the jurisdiction of the United States. Well, we weren't under the jurisdiction of the United States. So how did that change? Well, they start interpreting. They didn't even pass laws. Again, forget the whole idea of rule of law. Doctrine of Christian Discovery was not passed through the legislature. And Justice John Marshall didn't start there. In the next case that he ruled on, that was Johnson v. McIntosh, and the next case that he ruled on, which was Cherokee versus Georgia, he basically said, Native people are like wards of the state. He said we were like wards of the state. And he said that we were not sovereign nations. So he creates this notion that the United States is our trustees. Now, I don't know if any of you saw Killers of the Flower Moon, the movie about the murder of the Osage. Well, or read the book, better yet. What you saw there is this notion of custodianship, where Native people were treated as ignorant, as incompetent, literally incompetent, because that's what they told the Osage. They had to register themselves as incompetent every time they wanted to collect a check for their own oil revenue. They were not trustworthy, and they were incompetent. So that's 1920s. Well, when they passed the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act in 1988, they said the same thing again. Native people are incompetent, and they aren't trustworthy. They can't run their own gaming enterprises. So we're going to make them enter into a contract with the state that they're residing in. In our case, the state of New York. That's how Kathy Hochul squeezes $2 billion out of the Seneca Nation. And you know how she did it? She froze their accounts. She froze all of the Seneca Nation's operating accounts. They couldn't make payroll, they couldn't pay vendors, they couldn't provide any of the services. She did it on a Friday, hoping she could squeeze them tight enough so by Monday they'd cough up that $500 million. And then you know what she did with the $500 million, right? You don't know? She gave $400 million of it to one of the richest guys in Western New York, Terry Pagula. Who's he? He owns the Buffalo Bills. She gave him $400 million for a new Buffalo Bills stadium. And then she's the hometown hero. She's making sure the Buffalo Bills get a brand new stadium so they don't move to Toronto or something. Colonization didn't end 200 years ago. It's still going on today. So when I see what's taking place between Israel and the Palestinians, it's not unusual to me. It's what's been going on for 500 years. For 500 years this has been going on. And you cannot remove the conversation about colonization and not include it in the conversation about slavery. The first transatlantic slave ship wasn't bringing Africans to the Western Hemisphere. It was bringing Native people back to Spain. And yes, many of them died on the way. But we're still going to teach kids in the history book. We're going to teach them about Pocahontas and Captain John Smith. All of that stuff is a lie. It's all bullshit. But it's still in the history books today. I led the charge to end the use of Native mascots by high schools. I got that ban done by pushing. I wasn't going to get embroiled in the culture wars of the New York State legislature. No, I went to the Department of Education, and I said, 20 years ago, under George Pataki, no less, your Commissioner of Education told schools to get rid of these things. And in 20 years, you've been silent. So after I took on my old high school, Cambridge, New York, I pressed Dr. Betty Rosa to say, okay, now that you told Cambridge they have to change it, tell the rest. And she did. She called me up on a Friday night, as a matter of fact. That kind of took me by surprise. She asked me if I'd sit on the Indigenous Mascots Advisory Council to help produce the guidelines for this thing. So I didn't follow the path that anybody laid down. I didn't put a lobbying effort together. I just made noise in the best way that I could, and I used all the voices that were behind me to make that happen. And what do we have now? Just today, I'm still battling people on social media who are just saying, why don't you just go back to the reservation and get drunk? Sell pot out of your pot stores, or maybe you can get a job pumping gas. That's the message that I get from good old white people in Western New York. So we can't pretend that colonization was something that happened, that the United States just happened to be involved in. They're still involved in it. They took Hawaii. Hawaii didn't enter into an annexation treaty with the United States. They took Hawaii. And when they built 2 atomic bombs, they had no good white people to drop it on, so they dropped it on Japan. And they're going to teach children today that it somehow saved lives. Look, George Washington, when he gave the orders to go into Seneca territory, said, let them know the terror of their chastisement. Accept no pleas for peace. You need to destroy their ability to live, destroy their food, destroy their lands, and you need to do it in a way that it will have intergenerational trauma. Yes? Okay. Look, I could talk for hours here, and I'm passionate about this stuff because I live it every day. I live on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. I took an 8-hour train ride to get down here for this. I think we need to hold the United States accountable. It's great to try to pull Israel into a criminal court. The United States is criminal. The United States and the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand were the only 4 countries that voted against the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And they still stand in stark violation. And it isn't just the Republicans, it's the Democrats too. And it's not enough to say, okay, even though it says free, prior, and informed consent is what is required to do anything that impacts indigenous peoples, and this is the minimum standard that the UN DRIP is. So when I hear Barack Obama says, well, I'm gonna sign an executive order that says consultation is required. Consultation is not consent.
That's right.
Consent says we have the power to stand up to the things that you do that oppose us. Look, they still built a pipeline through Standing Rock. They still built it. It didn't matter that 10,000 people showed up. And you know what? After the whirlwind of activity that was caught on the news, how many people still think about the pipelines that are going through native territories? We actually have, where I live, we actually have residual effects from the West Valley Nuclear Test Facility, which is where they were storing nuclear waste. It comes into our creek, the river, the Cattaraugus Creek that flows through Seneca territory. So when we talk about the legacy of colonialism, it isn't just legacy. It's an ongoing physical act that takes place. So while I do stand here in solidarity with the Palestinians, more importantly, I stand in opposition to what the United States is doing. I mean, didn't they just authorize like 1,500, 2,000 pound bombs to be sent to Israel just yesterday or something like that? I mean, this is the country that you are a part of. And if you feel powerless, then you have to do more than vote in an election. We all have a bigger responsibility. We have to do more. And when those people do get elected, I don't care which party gets elected, they need to be held accountable. And you know what? They shouldn't feel safe. And I'm not threatening violence here. But no one should feel safe if you're a part of continuing this violence against people. So look, I'm not going to take any more time. I appreciate the time that I was given. I appreciate the invite to be a part of this thing. And I want to thank some of my listeners that made it into the room and follow me on Facebook and the like. I'm John Kane. Thank you. Yellen.
You know, folks, by the way, my shirt is a design, I actually designed a
Flag, and it's for missing murdered Indigenous women. It's something that people are just simply not aware of. So in 4 weeks of coverage of the missing Gabby Patino, back a few years ago, you'll probably remember that, the pretty little blonde girl. Yeah, well, from the same area that she turned up missing, there were 5 Native people that were missing that nobody ever heard about. And in the time that they were searching for Gabby Patino, and look, I'm not trying to minimize the horror that she went through, but this is the truth, that Native people, we have a higher rate of death by cop than anybody else. We're a small population, so the numbers don't seem very high. But as far as the percentage of our population, Native women experience the highest rate of violence and sexual assault than anybody in the country. That's not by accident. And it's not like there's some sort of genetic predisposition for Native people to have to experience this. It's set up, it's policy driven. So is the poverty on Native territories. It's policy driven. So in case you were wondering what the shirt was, I just wanted to explain it.
Thank you.
Okay, and finally, the main event. We have Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi. Dr. Rabab is an internationally known scholar and distinguished professor committed to community development and student engagement alongside her extensive academic work, publication, and teaching schedule. She is the founding director and senior scholar of Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies at San Francisco State University. She developed the Amid Studies as an academic minor with courses such as Palestine, Islamophobia, civil liberties, gender and modernity, borders, colonialism, imperialism, and resistance, Arab literature, Arab media images, and Arab revolutions. Dr. Abdulhadi has been recognized with scholarly and community honors and awards, most recently including the Dr. Clifford L. Oida Humanitarian of the Year Award by the Day of Remembrance Consortium. Her other awards include the Angela Davis Award for Public Scholarship, the Middle East Studies Association, the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Middle East Association, the Georgina Smith Award by the American Association of University Professors, and there's a bunch more on here, and we'll be forever listing because she's a very accomplished scholar. But clearly, she is an amazing scholar and amazing activist, and we're just looking forward to hearing from her. So please give her a warm round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Oops. Is my mic okay? All right. Yes. Let me just get settled here and open my notes. Good afternoon. مساء الخير. Good evening, the people in Palestine and the Arab world. They broke their fast now, and they finished commemorating the Day of the Land, probably throughout most of the world. I start by land acknowledgement that my university, San Francisco State, sits on the stolen, apologies John, indigenous land of the Ohlone Nation, and continues to be indigenous, and we continue to have a commitment to defeat the settler colonial project of the United States. I make this acknowledgement as an indigenous Palestinian whose land is colonized by Israeli settler colonialism, and where it is essential for anyone who comes to visit or lives on the indigenous land of Palestine, all of Palestine, to not only acknowledge those lands, whose lands it is, but that no matter how long or short they stay, and no matter how good or noble their intentions, the fact that they continue to reside and visit and even express solidarity, whether they are occupiers, visitors, or comrades in arms, their presence must be validated by the indigenous people of the land if they do not wish to be defined as settlers. I also start by stopping for a moment of silence to honor all those martyrs who fell in Gaza, in the streets of the United States, North America, Turtle Island, South Africa, Lebanon, Puerto Rico, Vietnam, Kashmir, or anywhere and everywhere in the world. We honor everybody. We remember everyone. We also remember the martyrs who have fallen a long time ago, as we remember the martyrs who are fallen as we speak today. I resisted responding to a lot of the comments that were made by my sister Asante and my brother John, because there is a lot of conversation to be had. Because I was tasked today with speaking about the Palestinian Land Day, and today, March 30th, is the Palestinian Land Day. So I will stick to that, and then in the discussion, we can expand on everything else. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about what is Land Day, and situate myself in relationship to Land Day itself in the 1948 areas, expand, and share with you some journal notes I wrote when we were in Palestine for the 70th anniversary of Nakba on Land Day, and maybe made a few lasting comments about what's going on and how is this connected to Gaza, and you will see that. First, what is Land Day? Land Day was declared in 1976 by Palestinians in the 48 areas. These are Palestinians, just like my brother John King spoke about, the indigenous native people here, are colonized by Israel. In 1975, the year before, Israel stepped up its campaign to appropriate Palestinian-owned land in Israel and to confine Palestinians to isolated Bantustans. The day before, on March 29, Palestinians met, organized, and we can go over the many ways in which they developed the organizing, starting to be together and so on this particular issue. They've been doing it on other issues earlier, and declared March 29, 1976, a general strike. Israel's response has been to mobilize its military, its police, its tanks, and declared a complete curfew against any Palestinians for the following day. The following day, March 30th, Palestinians defied the curfew and went out in demonstrations throughout the 48 areas. As a result, 6 people were martyred, killed by the Israeli military. Mind you, these are supposed to be citizens of the state of Israel. We're not even talking about what people call the occupied areas, the West Bank and Gaza and Jerusalem. We're not talking about Palestinian refugees throughout the world and refugee camps in Lebanon and so on. These are supposed to be citizens of the state of Israel that claims to be the only modern, civilized, and democratic country in the whole of the region. Just keep that in mind. 6 people were killed on that day, and I just want to mention their names to honor them. Can you, oh yeah, this is part of our protest. If you can move the next slide, if you don't mind, please, because it shows, yeah. So this is the memorial that is made for them in Sakhnin. Their names they were killed in Sakhnin, in Arabat al-Battuf, and Deir Hanna. Today, by the way, Deir Hanna was one of the biggest demonstrations that took place in the 1948 areas. Their names were Raja Abu Raya, Khadr Khalaile, Khadija Shawahne from Sakhnin, Khair Yassin from Arabe, Muhsin Taha in Kufr Qanna, and Rifat Zuhairi from Nurur Shams refugee camp in Tulkarem, was killed in clashes. Over 300 people were detained, more and more victims, but I will spare you the details. I speak of the Day of the Land also because I actually have a very personal connection with the president of the Palestinian Following Committee that was chairing the Day of the Land, the Tawfiq Zayed, the former mayor of Nazareth, the Palestinian former mayor of Nazareth. And we're going to hear his poem, very well-known poem, Unadikum, that he wrote, and it was composed by a Lebanese composer, Ahmed Qabour. And it also shows the unity between people. We can discuss that. In 1976, actually, I went and participated in a Nazareth work camp in Nazareth. I come from the West Bank, from the city of Nablus. We're not actually allowed to sleep overnight inside the 48 areas. We could be picked and arrested. I was studying at Birzeit University. I told my parents that I'm going to stay that weekend to study, and then went to participate in the camp. Unfortunately, one of my friends told my parents, and my parents were very upset, very worried that I would be arrested, and I would be, the house will be demolished, and they will be deported, and so on. And I don't regret it. I regret that they found out. I wish they didn't. But I knew Tawfiq Zayed through multiple ways, including when I was studying in the Soviet Union. He would come a lot. He wrote a lot of books around that and so on. But I think it's really important to talk about the way that John was talking, linking the past and the present, that the land appropriation and the takeover of the land has never stopped by Israel. As a matter of fact, just today, let me just get my, just today, Israel confiscated 27,000 dunams in the West Bank. Today, 27,000 dunams. They claimed that this was under the pretext of protecting natural preserves. This is a country that actually pulled the trees from the forests in the Galilee, like Ain Hod, the indigenous trees, and planted European trees in their place to show a different origin, to create a different history. And as a result, fires all the time happen in there because those trees are not actually indigenous to the area. So now they're creating natural preserves in the West Bank. This is in Jericho and the Golan and the Jordan Valley. 11,000 dunams through 3 orders that are declared state land. State land in the governance of Jerusalem and Nablus, 230 dunams through 24 orders to control land for military purposes that in the future would not allow Palestinians to reach their land, to pick their olives, to till their land, and to have an income and dignified living. Just to remind us also that at the same time that the land is taken, and to connect with the martyrs in Land Day, today the number of the Palestinians who have been killed so far in Gaza, where is it? Give me a minute. It's very difficult when you do things on the phone. Because I was trying to find the most recent figures, not the older ones. It's 32,623 martyrs, 75,092 people injured, 85% of the people in the Gaza Strip have been displaced. This is on top to remind ourselves that 70% of the Gazans are refugees, actually come from the areas around Gaza that are on which the kibbutzim have been built. We can talk about that more. And this is based on a plan that Israel developed and this is according to Dr. Walid Khalidi, called Dalit Plan, or Plan D. That was named by the Zionist High Command on the military operations. It was launched in April and early May 1948 in various parts of Palestine. They involve creating Plan Dalit is like D, in which they pushed the Palestinians from the coastal areas like Jaffa and Haifa, and actually Jaffa, the middle more, into the east. So some ended in what is now the West Bank and Jordan. To the north, that's why many of the Palestinians in the refugee camps in Lebanon come from the Galilee, from the upper Galilee. And actually, the accent is very similar to Lebanese accent. The food is very similar, and so on. And many of the Palestinians in the south were pushed towards Gaza. But it's really important to also remember that Gaza, Hebron, and Naqab, which is the desert, are all part of the same community. That people, when people have been pushed away, if you stand on the highest mountain in Hebron, you can actually see. You see Gaza and you see Naqab. But Israel also had another plan for Naqab, where it kicked out Palestinians, created something called siyaj, fence, in which Palestinians were confined, and built kibbutzim, some of which that you hear today, their names in the news a lot, in their place. Today there are at least 45 Palestinian communities in the Naqab that are not recognized, quote unquote, not recognized by Israel, by the state of Israel. This means that the state of Israel does not provide them electricity, does not provide them water, does not provide them any services, schools, they're all on their own. And the way Palestinians survive in Naqab is they have solar panels they put in order for them to generate electricity and power. And they continue surviving, and the body that's actually building settlements in their place is called the Jewish National Fund, which is very much present all around us here. Just walk from one place to the other and you will see it. The connection between Palestine and the indigenous people goes also way back. Jabotinsky, one of the founders of Zionism, said in The Iron Wall, the book, compared Zionists to the, quote-unquote, the Pilgrim Fathers, the first real pioneers of North America, and likened Palestinians, quote, to instinctive jealous love of Palestine, to that of the Sioux for their rolling prairies. They were very conscious. Every one of them were very conscious of that. And I think people already are aware of Herzl and Rhodes, who created Rhodesia in southern Africa, the comparison and writing and so on. So there is a lot of connections into that, and there are a lot of connections with here too, which I'm going to keep to the discussion. I want to just share with you part of my memoirs, because we don't have a lot of time left for the discussion and the event, that I've written in 2018, when we were on a delegation called Teaching Palestine, Pedagogical Praxis and the Indivisibility of Justice. We connected with Palestinian universities, Birzeit and Al-Najah. We did conferences there, and then we traveled throughout Palestine, because we always believe that it's important to engage in reciprocal solidarity, that people don't just go show and tell and come back and do not engage. They actually engage with the people who are in Palestine together and connect in reciprocal critical solidarity. We visited Naqab, we visited Nazareth. So I'm going to just read to you some of the things that have happened on March 30th, 2018. This was really important because it was the 70th anniversary of Nakba, or the destruction of Palestine in 1948. And we also say that this is not something of the past. The Nakba continues every single day, and Israel is trying to create another Nakba today by pushing more and more Palestinians to the south of Gaza and also to get them into Sinai. So empties the land to erase the presence of Palestine and say that this is a land without people. In order to do that, you need to engage in genocide. So genocide is actually a very logical part of Zionism and settler colonialism. It's not accidental. It's not about something just emotional and utopian. It actually has very materialist and very capitalist economic issues, the same way as Sister Asante has spoken to us. So here goes. It was the morning of March 30th, 2018. We had just finished our meeting with Haneen Zu'bi, the Palestinian former member of the Israeli Knesset, who was silenced by her parliamentarian Zionist colleagues and smeared and threatened by misogynist and racist campaign. I've shared, of course, a lot of stuff about Haneen Zu'bi, including the article that I wrote in correspondence and discussion call and response with Asata Shakur that I can share with any of you later on. But in terms of the land day itself, on that day, we drove from Nazareth, where we met Haneen, to Sakhnin, which is one of the villages where Day of the Land, many people were martyrs. We wanted to pay tribute to the memorial of the martyrs and join the march. On our way, the radio of the minibus of the Palestinian driver, to whom I will refer as Abu Anas to protect his identity, was playing Palestinian resistance music. My ears perked up, and I was trying so hard to resist the tendency to sing along, as we all do. On school trips, picnics of various Palestinian women's associations, or buses, conventions of the General Union of Palestine students, demonstrations from various parts of the US to Washington, DC. We always do this again and again. But the songs were by Marcel Khalifa, Ahmed Qa'bour, Al-Ashiqeen, among others, set to lyrics of Palestinian poets, such as Ibrahim Toukan Mawtini. Many of you know that poem, that we consider to be the official anthem of Palestine, even though the Palestinian Authority created another one that has been changed so many times to fit the political situation. But we stick with Mawtini. Jawaz al-Safar by Mahmoud Darwish, or Mahmoud Darwish Sajjal Ana Arabi, write down I'm an Arab, and my identity card is 50,000, and I have 8 children, and the 9th is going to be there. Are you okay? Oh, yeah. Oh. Okay. I'm going to start. Okay, soon enough, let me just see if I'm going to be able to. Yeah, I'll finish this in 5 minutes, and then I'll stop and we can have discussion. Soon enough, the station started broadcasting news and reporting live on the Great March of Return that was taking place in Gaza. It was planned by people in Gaza, some people forget, for May 15th to commemorate 70th anniversary of Nakba, during which an estimated 750 to 800,000 Palestinians were uprooted from their land and displaced in 1948 in 59 refugee camps throughout the region. Palestinian organizers of the Great March of Return wanted to drive the point home that the United Nations must reverse its unjust resolution 181 to partition Palestine in November 1948 and implement resolution 194 that enabled Palestinian refugees and their descendants to return to the lands of their ancestors. Thus, it was called the Great March of Return. But the Great March of Return did not start on May 15th. It was actually timed to start on March 30th, 2018. It wasn't coincidental, it was very deliberate. It emphasized the Palestinian organic connection to the land and their refusal to accept displacement as a done deal. They rejected the normalization of the oppressive status quo, and the organizers refused the notion that geography is destiny, while paying attention to the differences in Palestinian context in different parts of the world. I was curious, I asked Abu Anas, how come broadcast from Lebanon is actually reaching Nazareth? We're right there in Nazareth, in the Upper Galilee. There's lots of mountains and so on. No static at all, whatsoever. Could this be from Gaza? Gaza was too far. Could this be from the West Bank? No, all West Bank stations are FM. They don't actually reach. They can just reach only a few cities and so on. Where was it coming from? So he says to me, no, la ya ukhti. He says, no, this is from here, min inna. Radio stations among Palestinians, the 48 areas were popping up, reproducing the narratives of resistance, the history of Palestine, and rejecting the Zionist narrative. We were going there, driving, in order to go to Sakhni, to first Kawkab Abu al-Heja, and Abu al-Heja, by the way, is after one of the families, Abu al-Heja, whose own village, Ain Hod, was completely taken over by Zionists and not destroyed, but turned into an artist colony for Israeli liberal artists, and continues to exist today. And actually, even the olive press stone is displayed in Ain Hod by the Israelis as one of the relics when they take tours around. So we went to Kawkab Abu al-Heja to pick up Fathiya Hussein. Fathiya worked with Adala, which is the Palestinian legal group that documents what happens in the 48 areas, and to go into to Mihatar, go to the memorial, and then walk from Sakhnin to Arabat al-Battuf. Next slide, please. We approached thousands who were gathered. We saw, yeah, go on to the next one, please. No, go on. Okay, no, more. No, the young women, the two women in black t-shirts. No, it's all scrambled up. I don't know where it's gone. But the security was being done by Palestinian women. And they were wearing t-shirts. They were actually holding the security, which is protecting the community. There were multiple, as you saw, multiple flags everywhere, and they were banned, by the way, by Israel. Just to remind you, this is not something that people are just doing out of will, and so on. And then, so I told you I was wearing this one, and then I found this young baby who was also wearing something similar, and I asked her father if I could take a picture with her, and we did. But also inside the commemoration itself, once we arrived, the big hall, huge hall, was named, this is the picture with Haneen Zobi. This is Haneen Zobi, that's here, that she was arrested about a month ago when she went to protest, have a protest for Gaza in Nazareth by the Israeli police. She's an Israeli citizen. And so we went into there. The whole tent was named after Mahmoud Darwish Hall. And there were multiple people from every single walk of life in Palestine, all the political parties, all the organizations that were there. And they started Mawtani, which is also banned. This is not acceptable by the Israeli state. Everybody in the rally stood and sang along. They were again defying this. Now, the sister told me 5 minutes, so probably now I have 3 left, right? No, I'm not trying to go over, although I do need more time. I wanted to say that the land day here, and I'll skip, is part and parcel representation, and today there are so many demonstrations and so on to actually demand the repatriation and rematriation of our lands. Reject the expulsion. Reject the theft, whether it is Sheikh Jarrah, whether it is Silwa, Jerusalem, or the 2 last examples I will share were al-Hiran in Naqab, which was, as I told you, going to be replaced by a Jewish settlement called Hiran by the Jewish National Fund, and where we met with the widow of Yaqub al-Qi'an, who was killed by the Israelis, and the Israeli military claimed that he was Hamas, and he was a terrorist attacking them. They killed him. They couldn't justify how. And now the investigation, by the way, showed that he was walking, and they just killed him, as they did, by the way, yesterday. They killed 2 Palestinians, and they with the bulldozers tried to cover their bodies and so. But the other one that was very interesting, that actually connects to this solidarity, was Al-Araqib. Al-Araqib is a village in Naqab, in the south of Palestine, that has been destroyed at least 200 times. 200 times. And it gets destroyed, and the people of Al-Araqib build it again. It gets destroyed, the people of Al-Araqib build it again. Again and again and again. Over 200 times. It's still going on. And they actually have sought from the Israeli Supreme Court, just like the brother was talking about the US Supreme Court and so on, try every single avenue possible just like the Great March of Return was a peaceful, non-violent form of protest in which hundreds of Palestinians were killed and shot by the Israeli military. So it doesn't matter. But you resist and you stand up for yourself, your fate is to be killed or die standing. Al-Araqib, so we go and meet the mayor of Al-Araqib. And the delegation had 3 South African sisters. That was a very international one. We had people from Chile, from Mapuche, people from Puerto Rico, from Haiti, from South Africa, and we were telling him what's going on. And he said, "Where are the South Africans? Bring him here, bring him here." He was telling them how the South African ambassador to Palestine would visit Al-Araqib on a regular basis to express solidarity with the people who are standing still in Al-Araqib. This is to say that solidarity, just like Asante was speaking, and I love your name, building on Kwame Ture, and who was actually a friend, and Nkrumah, whom I didn't know, but was part of the non-allied movement along with Nasser and others. And Brother John was saying, this solidarity goes a long, long way. It goes a long way. Some of it we know, some of it we do not know. And some of it we do not know, not only because we didn't dig the archives, but because the archives refuse to be dug up, because there are some resistance links that continue and are not to be revealed. Maybe sometime in the future, 100 years from now, when we're all dead, somebody will actually say, this is what has happened. But it's not appropriate at this time. And some of it we haven't been able to actually yet collect with each other. Because the living archives, what I call the living archives, the resistors, the elders, the people who have led the struggle for so many years and so many generations, do not have and did not have the time to sit down and write the history. So I'm very appreciative to Sister Asanta that she doesn't start the Black Palestinian solidarity from Trayvon Martin in 2012 or from 2014 Ferguson. Yes, it became much more well-known because social media became much more well-known. But it goes way, way back. It goes back Malcolm X. It goes back, actually, my late friend and one of my mentors, Elambe Brath, who was a founder of the Patrice Lumumba Coalition and passed away, said actually that he was taught about Palestine in 1948-49 by a Palestinian neighbor of his. This says 2 things, and I will stop at that. One is that when we are engaged in resistance, despite the hegemonic, despite the colonizing effect, despite settler colonialism, that chokes us, that leaves us no place to breathe, that we're constantly surviving and so on, we always find ways to resist and to connect with each other. People connect with each other in ways known and unknown. Today, people are connecting with ways that are so known because we need to make that so known. Otherwise, we allow Israel to get away, not practically, with real murder and genocide. And today, people, the whole world is speaking up, from South Africa to Mount Vernon to New York City. There are people protesting today. Berlin, Paris, London, Deir Hanna, Ramallah, Nablus, everywhere around the world. People are protesting day in and day out because we cannot normalize oppression, nor can we allow this to go business as usual. We must resist, and we must stop colonialism and settler colonialism and its connection with imperialism, and the alliances that the US, Israel, and the other settler colonies connect with each other for real reasons, that we've heard some of them, in order for us to be free, in order for us to get back the land, to get back repatriation and rematriation to our lands, and to reverse the process that has shackled, killed, humiliated, raped, and abused and brutalized our people. One day, we will win. Thank you.
We're gonna have a quick Q&A. One of our panelists has to leave really soon. If you're on the Zoom, I believe the Q&A box is open, so if you can just type in your question. Unfortunately, like I said, we're low on time, otherwise I would just allow you guys to ask the question out loud. But we will check the question and answer box. I will check it, so please feel free to ask your question. Yeah, so, and the same thing, Santua is still on there, so if you have a question for her too, please feel free to ask that. And yeah, so don't be afraid.
John first because he has to go.
Yeah, so feel free to ask your questions. Please, if you have any questions specifically for John, please ask them for him first, because he has to, you know, roll out in a second. And yes, let's go. Please ask at this mic so that people can hear you. Don't be scared.
I do apologize. I have to take a train, so I don't have much flexibility here. So, and I welcome anybody who wants to ask me anything about what I said or perhaps something that I didn't cover. Obviously, you know, I could talk for hours on most of these issues, as both of us can. So feel free to ask something that I can address. I do have to leave literally in only a couple of minutes, so
Go for it.
I apologize. So go ahead.
Please use the microphone if you want to be heard and recorded.
I love you. Oh my God, look at you. Look at that.
Go.
Yes.
Okay, I've heard a lot of chatter here today, and if I sound annoyed, it's because I am. So I'm going to ask a simple question. What are the next steps? And what are the plans going forward? Africans, and I use that in scare quotes, in America are the 10th largest income producer in the world, collectively. And yet we sit here and we whine at people's feet. We spend our monies on all kinds of stuff.
Mike, please stay with the mic.
As we spend our money on all kinds of stuff, we get nothing in return. All we need to do, as Asada has said, we have nothing to lose except our chains. Open your minds and open your eyes and stop playing. Because right now you're playing with people who aren't playing with you. And when you see this hat on my head, you may be confused and think it's some Bubba's hat. This hat was created by First Nations and African peoples. Europeans wore tricorns. And the caballeros, they rode the horses. The Moors were the people who were the greatest horse people in the world. So this didn't just start, not even in 1492. The first peoples in Europe are basically all gone. They suddenly became white. God bless them. The Irish, as she's already said no thank you. What are you going to do? What are we going to do? Thank you.
Well, if you're asking me what are the next steps, I mean, part of the whole thing is that we are fighting for our autonomy, our distinction. We are not just, this isn't just about land back. This isn't about finding some comfortable place within the systems of oppression that we can hide out in. That has taken place. That has taken place with too many people in American society, and too many people globally still look to that same type of system, that they can find some piece of it that they can hide out in. We're not trying to hide out. So I agree, there are plenty of people who have resources. And while I appreciate the intent of a land acknowledgement, it means nothing to me.
Okay.
And because, you know what? If you're not doing anything to help us restore. We went through 150 years to 200 years of residential schools where children were ripped from our homes, sent off to these prison-like schools, sometimes thousands of miles away from their homes. Right. And in Canada alone, they've discovered over 8,000 children that have been buried in mass graves at those schools. They haven't even begun to look here in the United States. Carlisle Indian School down there in Pennsylvania, they had a graveyard. They acknowledged that there were hundreds of kids that were buried there. But that's not even counting the ones that they aren't acknowledging, or the ones that they sent home on death's door so they wouldn't have to bury them there. This has been studied. So I'm telling you, as I sit here, I'm not asking for reconciliation. I'm asking for restoration. No, I'm demanding restoration. I'm not asking for everybody to leave their homes. But you know what? There are plenty of places that we have to fight every single day to have the freedom to do the things on our own land without federal income tax, without state tax, without the governor, without the president, without Deb Haaland, who works for the white guy in the White House. So, I mean, this is, you know who Deb Haaland is? Yeah. She's the Interior Secretary. And we're supposed to fall over ourselves. Kind of like, remember when Mitch McConnell told black people, what do you mean reparations? You got a black president. Well, this is the same thing with Deb Haaland. What do you need reparations for? You got a native person sitting in the Interior Department. Great. You took one of ours and you put them in your position. So we lost one. We didn't gain one. So when I talk about the next steps, you need to figure out what your next steps are. What are you going to do to support Native people reclaiming their autonomy and asserting their autonomy? What are you going to do? Because if you're just doing a land acknowledgement, I hate to put it this crass, but when are you going to cut the check? Mm-hmm. When are you going to buy from Native people? When are you going to do something that supports Native people's existence? Because there's nothing that happens. In fact, the more and more people, I mean, and look, and I'm not condemning any person who comes to the United States as a refugee. But you know what? At some level, you're still part of the same wave that's displacing our existence here. No matter where you're coming from, or why you're coming from, or why you're coming here. All these universities, many of the universities are funded, their endowments have been funded by land grants. Well, you know what a land grant is? That's when they took native land and they told all these people, you sell it and you can use the money to fund your endowments. They also did the same, that's how the railroad got built as well. That all got built off of our resources, off of our lands, off of our futures. And yet we don't attend those universities. And then I hear people say, yeah, but don't you get to go to college for free? No, we don't. And in fact, most of those doors are closed to us. Why? Because we couldn't qualify anyway, because the educational systems that we're forced to go through, which is more systems of indoctrination, simply just don't work for us. So the question isn't, what are my next steps? The question is, what are yours? And I'm sorry, I have to leave it there. I thank you. I thank you. I am all over Facebook, so if you, as one way to get a hold of me, I have two Facebook group pages. One is called Resistance Radio with John Kane, and one is called Let's Talk Native with John Kane. You can contact me through there. Anybody who knows Jeff knows how to get a hold of me. I would love to come and speak, because this is the way that I get to engage. Yeah, I do a radio show, I do a podcast, but I don't get to look in people's faces. I don't get to see that somebody understood what I said. I also don't know if anybody's listening. So, by all means, please, my show is Thursday afternoons on WBAI at 3 p.m. The show rebroadcasts in Washington, D.C. on WPFW at 2 p.m. on Fridays. And I am going to reignite my Let's Talk Native podcast, which will happen. I haven't decided which day it's going to be, but it's going to be the same day every week, and it's going to involve a lot more interaction. So I kind of let that one go to the side because I've been concentrating on the radio. I'm going to do both because, frankly, we don't know how long we've got on radio. And at WBAI, we don't know how long we've got, period.
That's right.
And, you know, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to be there as long as I can be, but I'm not going away if it goes away. So thanks for asking.
Hello, Professor Rabab.
Hi.
So, it's not on. Come on. mic on?
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Hello, Professor Rabab. Thank you very much for all of the information that you provided us with, and the insight from like firsthand of being on the land during the land day time. My question is, what is the differences between what is the similarities between Black African struggle and Palestinian struggle, and what is the differences? Because by seeing the differences and the things that are common, maybe hopefully we can learn more how to work together, especially being here in the United States.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this question. I want to also before even talk about the differences and the similarities, acknowledge also that we're both, where Palestine is, there is settler colonialism, and here there is settler colonialism. So if there is, no, I have a mic. I don't have. I can't stand. I'm too exhausted. Please bear with me. Okay. So I think that it's really important to think about what is it that made these things happen possible, and I think that's one thing that with the United States. Kidnapping Africans and enslaving them in the U.S., I don't think would have been possible had there not been a settler colonial state. I don't think so. I also think that as an educator, and John spoke about university and so on, and the education, I think it's really important for us to dig into history and to think, and I always say, even when people talk about Gaza, I say history did not start October 7th, it started 1492. 1490, I mean, seriously, because if you want to think about the relationship between the US and Israel and settler colonialism and so on, this is 1492. Not only were the Jews subjected to Inquisition in Spain, which everybody, by the way, knows that, but also the Muslims were too. And the Castilian kings, who might have been zealous Catholics, but I think more importantly, they were into accumulating more money, and they were competing with the English because they wanted to find a route to be able to get to India. That's not as far, no, because I'm moving around, I'm going to stop moving. Because going around the Cape of Good Hope, all the way around South Africa was too far. This is why they hired a mercenary called Christopher Columbus, and told him, go find us an alternative route. When they got rid of the Islamic and Arab rule in Andalusia, they actually forced Muslims and Jews to eat pork, to drink wine, to see if they have actually really converted. And they slaughtered everyone else. And I think this is very important to think about. And I will add one more piece of information for people who might be interested in that, is that the only place where Sephardic Jews who came from Andalusia, had safe haven was among Arabs and Muslims. Yeah. Maimonides, Ibn Maymun, which I didn't know Maimonides was the same, because you study in English, I have no idea. Averroes is actually Ibn Rushd. It took me a very long time to figure out the parallels between the two. Maimonides was only able to find refuge when he got to Cairo. None of the southern European areas took him in. That's where he went as a religious scholar, and he settled in Cairo, and he built, and the Egyptian actually rebuilt the place where he's restored it and so on. So this history is not known. And the reason I'm saying this history is really important, because also this whole thing about saying, oh, Arabs and Jews from time immemorial, they hated each other and so on. Sorry, it's all a lie. I mean, let's dig into history and think about what has happened with the ancient nations, what has happened with people and so on. And Palestine, as a very strategic place and so on, was a place where people sought refuge. That's why there are Armenians in Palestine. There are Assyrians in Palestine. There are Kurds in Palestine. This is why, because people come, I mean, when people seek refuge, there is no problem. The problem is then when they come to actually kick you out and get rid of you and come up with all sorts of justification, theoretical, religious, whatever, the civilization and so on, in order to say, we really need to get rid of the people who are on this land, which is what Brother John was speaking about, the whole question of quote unquote. It wasn't even a discovery. The guy got lost. He did not discover anything. He got lost. That's why he called it West Indies. I mean, because he thought he arrived at India. And I think this is really important because our educational systems seeks to insist collective amnesia about the history that has happened, absolve people who have ripped off other people and colonized them and enslaved them from the accountability, and absolve the descendants today who benefit, even if they came from slave families or not. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, there's something called white supremacy. That's not just some kind of like prejudice. It actually has material goods to it. It has a content. It has a capital. It actually benefits certain people and doesn't. And people say, why is this? Because there is something about that we really need to recognize. I will just say one more thing about that, and this is why the solidarity movement today that has expanded everywhere, and the fact that there are many Jews who are anti-Zionists, who are actually using their location in society to show that they don't support Israel, that Israel doesn't stand in their name, and as whites saying that we are going to go and put our bodies on the line, get arrested and so on, because bail is less, there are more resources and so on. So they feel that this is their responsibility to do so, and it's the right thing to do. Okay, to think about, so if we think about this country as a settler colonial place, right? And then people say we are a nation of immigrants. I mean, seriously, really? Like, what? And everybody will come here. Indigenous people did not say everybody will come here. So you really don't have the right to welcome anybody to somebody else's land. So, it's really, this happened a lot after the Muslim ban, and it's very offensive. I mean, if it's offensive to us, imagine how it is for the native people here. I think so. So there is a very similar makeup, creation of Israel and the United States as settler colonies. But I think there is a difference, because sometimes when we speak about race, and I know Hadil asked me about the solidarities, but I think it's also race is a very important thing to talk about. That race does not operate in the context of Palestine and Israel in the same way. So people come and say it is the same. No, it's not the same, because the people of color, Jews of color, for example, Ethiopian Jews from Arab and Muslim countries and so on, were not kidnapped. I mean, yeah, the Ethiopians were, but they were willing participants, honestly. I mean, when Israel went to Ethiopia, put them on the planes, made a deal with Jafar Numeri of Sudan to go fly over and brought them, they were actually willing participants to be kidnapped. So they weren't really kidnapped. But this is very different than the question in the US. This is very different than the racialized question in the United States that built on settler colonialism, because nobody had a choice. People were kidnapped against their will, and we visited in Senegal one of the. I mean, I don't really even know. Like, I can't even begin to know what does this feel like to have no freedom. Everybody, all your being is controlled by somebody else. And the whole question that John was speaking about the whole, that being into a custodian, this whole patronizing relationship between the colonizers and the colonized, the oppressors and the oppressed, that people who are oppressed do not know how to handle their affairs, are incapable, they are of a minor child. And there's a lot of references to that, which was a Palestinian British mandate. Who gave them a mandate? Honestly, like, they went and they appointed themselves, colonized the land, and then gave it to the Zionists. So it's like, and then here the same thing is that you are not ready to take care of your affairs. Somebody needs to take care of you. So I think this is something that's actually really, really important to think about that. So I think sometimes when people say it's the same. There is racism in the US, yes, there is, but it's not the same. And also it's very different for Afro-Palestinians, who are, and it's in other, but we didn't have time today, who are a small but very vibrant community in the old city of Jerusalem that came to Palestine in the 7th century. Many came to Palestine from 4 African countries. Some of them were going to Hajj in Mecca, stopped in Jerusalem to visit the Aqsa Mosque. Some settled there, but then they also made choice. Every single time there were invasions of Palestine, they actually stood up and took up arms and defended Palestine, including the first martyr of the Aqsa Intifada was Osama Jidda, from the Afro-Palestinian community in Jerusalem. The first Palestinian woman to be arrested after 1967 occupation, not in general, was Fatma Bernawi, who's Nigerian Palestinian. I think these are actually, so there is a very different set. So I'm just saying that it's very hard to lump all of these things together, Afro-Palestinian, Black Jews, all of this all together. I think it needs to be simplified. Now, if we're talking about the Black movement as a radical movement, the way Sister Asante was speaking about, very different situation that there has been historically, she spoke about a lot, so I'm not going to repeat some of the things that she's talking about. But there also has been a lot of solidarity from the Palestinians too. I mean, I grew up knowing Muhammad Ali. But everybody used to say Muhammad Ali Clay, you know, because he actually refused, not only he became a Muslim, so of course he became a huge hero among Muslims in Palestine, but he refused to serve in Vietnam. And for that is kind of, we were in solidarity with the Vietnamese. We were in solidarity with a small country that defeated the biggest country on the face of the earth. Of course we were with the Vietnamese. How could we? Who are we going to go with? With the US? I mean, the same way we also cheered the Algerians and everybody else. So for Muhammad Ali was very well known. And I actually say in one of my articles is that even when Angela Davis was arrested and her picture was on the front page of the paper, my mother said she's framed. Like, my father wasn't paying attention. Why do you think she's black? Of course she's framed. I mean, like, it's supposed to be like a direct explanation, but it had content itself. There is something about the solidarity also. I mean, everybody knows about Ferguson, that when people were, because Ferguson police, the chief of police, the vice chief of police of Ferguson was actually trained in Israel also. So the tactics they use, curfews, they send the tanks or the personal carrier, because you know police departments buy what they call surplus from the military, because at one point people thought that we're going to have a peace dividend, peaceful economy or whatever, but also they use the stuff that is no longer, the army has more advanced things, so they sell them. They send the tanks and they send the water cannons into the streets. They declared a curfew, martial law, and they threw tear gas. And Palestinians, kids knew that. They said, okay, this is what you do. If you get milk, do this, do that if you get shot with tear gas, because we're used to it. I mean, I'm talking about, like, it is understood to be, there is always this kind of solidarity and understanding of other people's repression. This is like, and it's not accidental, not because Palestinians are exceptional or we are like different than other people, have an additional DNA things called justice. No, just like any other people. What happens is that you recognize injustices when you see them that are very similar to you. You recognize when people are getting killed by the police because it looks like Israeli soldiers who are going, and Israeli police who's killing Palestinians day in and day out. So on a basic level, there is recognition. And I think this is also on a basic level, within different sectors of the black community, there is recognition. Of course, there are also other sectors, and we should talk also about that, in the Zionist Christian church, that they believe, that they identify with Israel and so on. We hope one day they will actually realize that this is not really where their interests are. They'll wake up, but more and more people are. But this is the same way also with black. The more, and the movement had a lot to do with it too. The more the Palestinian movement arose and got radicalized, and the more the black movement arose and got radicalized, the more there was solidarity between the two. And if you see the solidarity, where it is coming and where it's happening, like SNCC, you know, Sister Asante talked about that. We actually interviewed, we do a lot of open classrooms, and one of them, we spoke to people who were part of SNCC actually at that time when SNCC was kicked out of its offices in Harlem because they did that statement about Palestine. The Fran Beal, Sam Anderson, Phil Hutchins, they were part of that. The last thing is that I will just speak about one example that maybe in the future we can expand on it a lot. And a lot of people don't even remember it or know about it. Is the statement on November 1st, 1970, that a number of black radicals came together and published in the New York Times a paid ad. And they said a paid ad that was in solidarity with Palestine, But it wasn't just in solidarity with nationalistic Palestine. There was complete analysis about Vietnam, about Zimbabwe, about South Africa, about Cuba, about Puerto Rico. I mean, everything. There is so much, this huge analysis, like the document in itself can be a course by itself. And solidarity with Palestine, and also cited several sites from Israeli and anti-Zionist Jews in the US, saying that being anti-Zionist is not the same as being anti-Semitic. I mean, they covered it all. The document is amazing. And we were able to bring the person who initiated it, Professor Strickland, who was at, I think, Amherst College, or UMass Amherst, and Sam Anderson, who's the one who was the younger person who edited it, and multiple people who signed it, that you will be surprised. Ella Collins, the sister of Malcolm X. So many people have signed it. It's a statement nobody even knows about. People don't even think about. And the reason the statement came about, it was a statement because a few months earlier, Bayard Rustin, who everybody hails as being great organizer of the March on Washington and so on, but you know, he was anti-union, he was very reactionary, he was trying to pull back, you know, at some point he was radical, but then he changed. And he had put a statement with a few figures, black figures, including, unfortunately, Shirley Chisholm, unfortunately, to support Israel. So all these black radicals who were actually from SNCC, Black Panthers, different parts, they came and they put this statement. It's an amazing statement. I invite you all to read it, and I invite you all to attend. Go to Ahmed Studies at SFSU on Facebook. Don't look at our site at the university site, because they changed the whole thing. They even removed the Arabic. It doesn't have anything useful. But on our Facebook page, on Instagram, on Twitter, and Teaching Palestine, we have all the open classrooms. They're all available. There is several huge series that we have honoring and talking about the links and actually analyze them and being very critical about what is it that we work about, what is it that we don't work about. And that also happens during the prisoner delegation. That was the first one, 2016, to Palestine. The Indigenous and Women of Color feminist delegation with Angela Davis and others, which was the first also one to Palestine and so on, happen again and again and again. And it's very hard to actually, like, I'm seeing you and I'm ignoring you for a minute, okay? Because I didn't get enough time to speak in my thing. But I just want to say that it's very difficult. I don't think it's useful to actually just put collapse the two contexts onto each other and say everything is exactly the same. Everything not is exactly the same. The tools, the mechanism, the repression, and so on, of course we recognize it. But there are histories to each context that I think it's really, really important. And we would be doing disservice to either struggle to actually collapse it and say it's just like the same and move on. We need to do the work. We need to be intellectually engaged in the intellectual labor, understand. And I'm not saying that because I'm an academic, because I'm also an organizer and an activist, because we need to understand why we're doing what we're doing. We can't just go and do without understanding why, how does it fit in the larger scheme of things, what are we going to do tomorrow, what have we done yesterday, how do we preserve ourselves as a movement. There's a whole bunch of things that, okay, I'm going to stop. Oh, it's Ahmed, A-M-E-D, at SFSU. It's on Facebook. Go on Facebook or YouTube. Don't look at San Francisco State site. I mean, Facebook shut us down, and the university wanted us to shut down because they don't like our radical stuff. But it's available. We have it all the videotapes are there. And you can also sign up, because we're going to have a huge event, by the way, with Loki and Ahmed Ka'bour. We already have them all. Yeah, they're all, we're just trying to figure out the time when we're going to have them. They already agreed. So we always do things about women prisoners. Yeah, they're all available. So please look at them, and you can sign up and check them.
Last question. Someone has a question for Asantua. They asked, can you please speak to the issue of Africans in America who say Palestine is not our problem in America and are being ignored? Our problems in America are being ignored.
That question Some Africans say that we shouldn't be concerned about Palestine. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Has that African ever heard of Mama Fatima Banawi?
Yeah, yes.
Then what are they talking about? If you know the story of Fatima Banawi, you would not ask that question. If you care about justice for all, everybody and the planet, you would not ask that question. I'm not Palestinian, I'm an African. But I see the confusion that Zionism causes African people. For example, and I'm gonna be real with you, why we got all these Negro Zionists running around here? Reverend Al Sharpton, Reverend William Barber, Congressmember Raphael Warnock. The students in Atlanta just had a silent protest at his church 3 weeks ago. Yeah. Right? They all worried about AIPAC. They all worried about, you know, all right, master, you want me to jump? How high? If you see what is happening in Gaza now, that is not the question you should be asking. What I see happening in Gaza now look like what they used to do to us a couple of hundred years ago. We know genocide. We know genocide when we see it. So how are we going to have these Black folks, Stacey Abrams and Bakari Sellers and all these other folks, you know, yapping around for AIPAC, right? When the Zionists are bombing churches in Palestine the way they bombed churches in the South 40, 50 years ago. Who wants to publicly say stupid stuff like that? Right? I know that kind of thing is out here. I know that. But the folks like that don't come around me anymore. They know I'm not having that anymore. How can you see a church be bombed in Palestine and say something silly about, well, that ain't about us and yada yada? I care about justice for everybody. And what we're doing now, what we're seeing now is we got these young people protesting in churches. You know, Black folks don't protest in a church. We don't do that. But it's a new day. We getting ready to roll up on a lot of people. Hakeem Jeffries, Gregory Meeks, you know? So, you know, it's a question of justice, right? And I don't have to be, you know, straight up Palestinian to understand that. I want the confusion to stop. I want the murder of the Palestinian people to stop. I want to continue to look at all these connections, because any repressive regime you can name in Africa, you can best bet Israel gave them the guns. Can we talk about Paul Kagame, right? So we just need to continue to, you know, study these things, be very diligent in our political education, join an organization where we're meeting people and working with people. They're getting ready to have a People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit on Memorial Day weekend. I'm looking forward to that. I hope I get to go, because now is the time we're having all kind of political activity to really show that we're willing to fight against Zionism in all of its political and theological manifestations, because we still got that problem too. You hear the word Zion, right? The word Zion is in the Bible, yes, but Zion in the Bible does not mean you steal somebody else's land. Jesus wasn't a Zionist, right? So there's all of these kind of things that we need to struggle with. But for the person, anyone thinking, any African person having that kind of question, I don't know. What are they talking about? Are they in an organization even? So yeah.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you again for coming out and sticking with us. Yeah, so I want to say thank you to Dr. Rabab, thank you to Santua, and thank you to John, who had to leave out early. We really appreciate you coming out to our Mount Vernon to Palestine teaching. we're gonna try to host different events throughout the year and in the future. So please stay on the lookout. If you haven't signed in, I know there's gonna be an announcement, but if you haven't signed in, please leave us your contact info and let us know if you wanna be, stay in the loop of what we're doing. And we also have a lot of information, so just start picking stuff up. We specifically, there's one of the cards there has on the back a QR code for a bunch of resources about Palestine. So pick up a bunch to share with people. And we also have an announcement, so Dale, if you want to come up.
If you follow us on Instagram, you will find all of the information, Westchester for Palestine. I wish I could have got the flyers with me today, but it just didn't happen. But yeah, thank you all for showing up, and thank you, speakers, again.
أشد على أياديكم وأبوس الأرض تحت نعالكم وأقول أفديكم أناديكم أشد على أياديكم وأبوس الأرض تحت نعالكم وأقول أفديكم وأهديكم ضياع عيني ودفء القلب أعطيكم وأهديكم ضياع عيني ودفء القلب أعطيكم فمأساتي التي أحيا جليبي من مآسيكم وأهديكم ضياع عيني ودفء القلب أعطيكم فمأساتي التي أحيا نصيبي من مآسيكم أناديكم أشد على أياديكم وأبوس الأرض تحت نعالكم وأقول أفديكم أناديكم. لا, the last one. على أياديكم وأبوس الأرض تحت نعالكم وأقول أفديكم أنا ما كنت في وطني ولا صغرت أكتافي أنا ما كنت في وطني ولا صغرت أكتافي وقفت بوجه ظلامي يتيما عاريا حافي أنا ما كنت في وطني ولا صغرت وقفت بوجه عدنامي يتيما عاريا حافي أناديكم